Good evening. I'd like to welcome everyone to the second day of our really outstanding workshop. The team has achieved a tremendous amount of work over the last couple of days, and we're excited to share the results of this morning's exercise. I'm going to ask Reno from Niagara Region just to give a few words of welcome and to get the meeting started, and then I'll take over again.
Thank you, Donna, and really I just want to welcome everybody to today's workshop. My name is Reno Mostacci. I'm the Regional Planning Commissioner for the region, and very pleased with the turnout tonight and the activities that we've had over the last couple days on the district plan. So thank you for coming, and thank you for everyone who's been participating. This is really an important inflection moment really for this community in terms of defining a new urban vision for the neighborhood. And it wouldn't be possible without the support that we've had from the team that we've put together. So you've met Donna Hind from the Planning Partnership. She is our lead facilitator. Also assisting us is Ken Greenberg, who is a very accomplished urban designer, having worked internationally, nationally, and of course a lot of experience in the GTA and in Toronto. Mr. Greenberg is a recipient of the Thomas Jefferson Gold Medal in Architecture, and so we're really pleased to have Ken here as part of our team. We're also been supported by Sonny Tomich at the back of the room there. Sonny is also a very accomplished urban designer, planner from the area, but is now currently in the city of Calgary and is joining us with his expertise as well. Is Michael Schraga still here? Okay, so Michael was also one of the urban designers contributing to the project, one of the partners at the Planning Partnership, so you'll see some of his work at the back of the room as well. And who am I missing? Oh, and Ron Palmer. So Ron Palmer, also with the Planning Partnership, planner, policy planner, giving us some insight in terms of future land use opportunities. And of course, Jamie Springer was assisting us. He joined us from New York City, where he works for a firm called H&M and HR&M, and providing us some background in terms of some of the economic and visitation opportunities that are available to us here in this area. So again, thank you. I just want to also thank some of my staff who put a lot of work and effort into this event. Tom Villela, who's the project manager for the Glendale District Plan, and Kristen McCauley, who is also assisting quite a bit. So thank you guys for all your work. So I'm just going to turn it over to Donna, and she'll move forward with the rest of the program. Thank you.
Thanks, Reno. Can I just get a quick show of hands of those of you who did not come to last night's event? So the new people. Oh, a lot of new people. Okay. Over the last couple of days, we started at 9 o'clock yesterday morning with a bus tour. About 30 people joined us on that bus tour. Then yesterday afternoon, we met with landowners, developers, their consultants, representatives of various agencies. And we probably had about 50 people in the room for the whole afternoon. And then last night was our first public session where we invited the community to come and talk to us about what was important to them. So all of the material that's on the wall still is a record of last night's conversation when we asked people why they moved here, what they thought the biggest opportunities for change were, what words should be captured in a vision statement, and what was important to them with respect to new buildings, new public space, and all things related to mobility. So I wanted to leave that up so you could make sure you had a look at it. And then this morning, our team met to start to diagram based on the input we got yesterday. So tonight we're going to show you the diagrams that were generated during this morning. We shared those diagrams this afternoon when we invited the landowners, their representatives, back again to see the results of the morning's exercise, and we're going to share that same information with the community tonight. And the reason why we were able to get so much work done is because we had such tremendous contribution from everybody who has a stake in this exercise, including staff from the region, the town of Niagara-on-the-Lake, the city of St. Catharines. So we had everybody right from the top of the food chain, Reno, who's the Commissioner of Planning, right down to his interns. We had people from representing all departments from the region and the town and the city. And so that's why we were able to accomplish so much today's. Good point. We also had lunch today with councillors from Niagara-on-the-Lake, and some of your councillors have been here. I think I saw Betty here almost every event that we've had over the last couple of days. So there's a lot of interest in what we've done, and your mayor has been here at a couple of the sessions as well. So tonight, Ken's going to walk you through the results of today's exercise. Our kickoff presentation, that those of you that raised your hand first time tonight, it will be posted online. So please have a look at that presentation because it really sets the stage for these last couple of days. So I'd like to invite Ken up to have give an overview of what we've done.
Okay, thank you very much, Donna. Good evening, everybody. For the benefit of those who are not here, I'm just going to use this slide to try and summarize the setup for the conversation. The Glendale district that we have been working on is a very large area. It's 700 hectares, of which 400 have been identified as part of the urban area. And it is roughly, in terms of scale, it's about 2 kilometers from north to south if it were a rectangle, and about 4 kilometers from east to west. And it's a highly strategic, significant area within the Niagara region, and its future offers enormous opportunities. And as we face these opportunities, and I think it's really significant that the region, Reno and his staff, have decided to do this planning exercise at this critical moment, framing a vision for the future for this area. We're really at a crossroads. We have been developing the world in a particular way for the past couple of generations, which all of us have experienced, all of us have grown up with, which was really about depending on the automobile for most of our travel. And as a result of that, we did something else. We separated where we lived from where we worked, from where we shopped, into different land areas. So to use the jargon of planning, we had segregated land uses. And in a sense, as an unintended byproduct, we kind of blew apart our communities. And we're now at a stage where we're trying to reassemble the pieces. So if you look at the 2 arrows on this diagram, the status quo would be to continue to develop very separate areas for all those aspects of our lives. And the paradigm shift that we are living through across North America, and particularly in Canadian cities, is moving us to more integration, more of an emphasis on community, on public space, on connecting with nature in our cities, natural areas, on having opportunities for active transportation, on having more things that we can have close at hand, on what we call complete communities in terms of the life cycle, that is housing for people at all stages in their lives, having employment, and having all of the services and amenities that actually make for complete communities. So that's really the thrust of that presentation that you can see online. There are a lot of examples of that relating to your particular situation, but also drawing on precedents from elsewhere and exploring those themes. We also have been, as part of this, talking to you. So a lot of people I recognize from last evening who were part of the group, and we asked people what they really liked about this area, what they valued, what they wanted to see, what made them come here or stay here. In some instances, people were born here. They've been here for multi-generations. And these are some of the things that we heard. And they're very basic. They like the idea that there's agriculture here, that food grows here, that it's a country environment. Obviously, you enjoy a very favorable weather for Canadians. I had people at my table from Timmins who pointed out to me that that was actually a really good reason to move here. The opportunity to live in a smaller community, a family community that feels close-knit, ease of getting around, love hearing the birds, buying local farm produce, the conservation area, the golf course, not having to suffer through Toronto traffic as I do. Small town atmosphere, proximity to Buffalo for certain things, crossing the border, good deals on shopping, and the centrality of the location in relation to things like Niagara Falls, the Niagara River, the Niagara-on-the-Lake Old Town, and so on. So it has a lot of enormous advantages and things that people really wanted to hold on to as change inevitably occurs. Some of the biggest opportunities that people saw for change had to do with Queenston as the Laura Secord Trail, the great history that's associated with that. Opportunity for festivals, public square, a lot of emphasis on having a real Main Street, a walkable shopping Main Street that would have a full range of amenities. We introduced the idea of an ecological park, eco park as it's referred to here, on that very large area which I'll point out later in the presentation, adjacent to the Seaway, part of which is owned by the Seaway Authority and part of which by the MTO. Rental housing, and some people thought we should have dense rental housing. Parking is always an issue, parking within the neighborhood. Community facilities, people talked about the fact that not having a grocery store, not having a community center, not having access to health care in the community, all those things that people in other communities enjoy that are missing here, and with the increase in population would be possible to have, because there's simply not enough people within this 400 acres to support that at present. Regular and direct transit. Obviously, there's great interest in the fact that a GO station may appear here, which will provide connections to Hamilton and Toronto and beyond. Meaningful employment, places for people to work with good jobs in the community, jobs that pay a decent salary. I think that was a really important criterion, that this not just be a transient community. There was interest in visitation, in having tourists, but people didn't want that to overwhelm the community. They wanted it to be a real authentic community, to have a basis for people to live and work here and make a living. A lot of interest in being able to get around by cycling. Bike lanes connected to the green spaces. Support for the college, having the Niagara College here got a very positive reaction. Student housing was an issue, and could that be better accommodated rather than the way it's necessarily handled now. We then asked people if they had to come up with a word or two to describe what the vision that we're aiming to create with your help would say, what would be those key words? And here are some of the ones that came up. Very concise. Sustainability, small town atmosphere, transit, bike lanes, year-round, complete community, balanced, walkable, open space, college, successful, useful spaces, quality of life, safe, beautiful, mixed use, an urban center, and transition into the countryside, into the surrounding areas. So we have, Donna, particularly the author of this, with a little help, tried to capture this in some phrases. This is a work in progress, but for the moment, this is a vision statement, and we want to have your feedback. Have we captured this correctly? Glendale at Niagara, which is what we're calling this for the moment, will be a vibrant community for people of all ages, lifestyles, and abilities, a place to live, work, play, learn, and grow. Its urban districts, with a mix of uses, will protect, integrate, and celebrate the natural and rural surroundings, reflecting the distinct character of the area. Glendale at Niagara will be framed by a new park on the Welland Canal, the creek valleys, the Niagara Escarpment, and the agricultural lands. Glendale at Niagara will put mobility first with a robust transit system, cycling trails, and pedestrian routes that seamlessly connect areas north and south of the QEW, overcoming the barrier, in other words. So let's now start to have a glimpse of what that might look like, because as we were trying to put the vision, articulate the vision in words, we were also sketching and trying to come up with some initial concepts. So we've identified, there are two concepts that you'll see at the back of the room, the two sketches, and I'm going to come to those in a moment, but they have many things in common. And we're not trying to position this as a popularity contest. We're not going to ask you to vote. We deliberately developed two concepts as a way of exploring options. What we come up with in the end could be a hybrid. It could combine aspects of the different options, but they have 10 big moves or 10 things in common. One is they lead with landscape, with the natural features. And this is important because more recently, those of us involved in planning and urban design have changed our whole approach to where do you start to make a plan. And it used to be that people would start with the buildings, they would start with the land uses, and then at the end of the day, you would end up protecting certain fragments of the natural environment and kind of fencing them off or staying out of them. We've kind of stood that on its head, and we're not alone in this. This is now a really strong movement saying the foundation of urban plans is the natural environment. We've been forced to acknowledge our dependency on nature, our relationship to nature, obviously through climate readiness and climate change, but more significantly, we really value and enjoy that connection with nature, with greenery, with the natural environment. So what this diagram shows as a layer in the plan, the basic layer that we start with, is if you put together the Niagara Escarpment, you add to that the original water courses, the creeks, the woodlots associated with those, and you add to that the green spaces along the Welland Canal, and things like the golf club, which after all is a green space as well. What you end up with is a green armature for the urban environment, an armature which sets the character of everything else that will follow. And then within that armature, we have, in both versions of the plan, we identified what seemed to be a really powerful idea that gained a lot of traction, that this very large green space on the edge of the Welland Canal, and the Welland Canal itself as a kind of blue public space connecting Lake Ontario and Lake Erie, should be given enormous value. The canal itself as a remnant of industrial archaeology, as a working canal, as something which is a feature of really world significance as a man-made creation from a particular historical period, has in addition this ability to create a major park in this space. And you have so much area for development, why use this additionally for development? We're going to have trouble filling up the 700 acres, or the 400 acres rather. Why not take the opportunity as the population grows to create a great ecological park? That park could be many things. It doesn't have to be devoid of other uses. It could be a gathering space. It could have an area to host concerts, to host recreation. It could do many things, but we think that can become a very strong feature. We see that also associated with travel on the canal, that we may have Great Lakes cruise boats that would actually come, that people would visit this area traveling along the canal, pleasure craft, and so on, something that would do many things but would be a really distinguishing feature in the area. We also think it's very significant that the urban boundary that's been drawn has a hard edge. And so this is not going to dribble out into the countryside and continue to erode the agricultural lands with sprawl. And we use this example from the Napa Valley in California, where you see that very significant boundary of an urban area. And that contrast between the urban and the rural is something that's particularly satisfying. We really like to be able to enjoy the quality of urban life and the quality of a rural setting of country life in close juxtaposition. This is something, by the way, that is completely lost to us in big cities. If you live in Toronto, you have to drive for hours to actually get into the countryside. It's extraordinary, and this is not a pleasant drive. It's extraordinary how the city has just sprawled out throughout the Greater Toronto Hamilton area, but you have this unique ability to have that contrast right at your doorstep. Then a next element is taking all the trails, the Bruce Trail, the other trail systems that are weaving through the area, and having them actually converge in this green framework that establishes the core identity of this urban place, so that you can travel from every part of it to every other part of it, walking, cycling, within greenery, within areas that are preserved and protected and enhanced as part of that green framework. Another thing that's coming, and we could have illustrated this in two different locations, but a GO station. And the GO station permitting a different way of getting to Toronto. Obviously, there is, of course, the QEW, but we all know what that experience can be like. But the opportunity to be able to have access with GO, and we're moving inevitably toward greater headways on GO, electrification, and eventually this becomes part of our transportation network in this part of Southern Ontario. The other thing that I think is shared by all of the explorations we've done is the opportunity to better integrate. As I said, there's a great deal of support for the college, but to better integrate the college into the district, to take advantage of its opportunities on its site for expansion, to develop the food tech industries, which can have all kinds of economic benefits in terms of job creation, all of the cultural activities and other things the college will bring to make it really, and you'll see how that plays out in the diagrams, really a much more integral part of the community itself. There was a lot of interest in this notion of having a main street, and that the outlet mall is one thing. That's a particular kind of destination retail. What it doesn't do, though, is serve daily life needs. It's not a place where you can buy groceries, where there's a hardware store, where there are all the things that serve people who actually live in the community. And for example, the people who live in Niagara-on-the-Lake, who are actually, they could theoretically walk across the parking lot to the outlet mall, but it's not the kind of place you would do your daily shopping. And so the notion that when we have enough population, we can actually support a real main street, and people talked a lot about the opportunity for small-scale shops, for mom-and-pop stores, for stores that would be very individually owned in many cases and have a variety of things that were part of daily community life. And social life was a strong desire. A diversity of housing. This comes to the notion of life cycle housing, as it's referred to, that at all different stages in your life, from a young family starting out, young single people, middle-aged, seniors, that there should be a variety of housing options so that people could stay in the community. They weren't forced to leave when the housing didn't suit them. There was a kind of worry in the group that I talked to about this turning into a retirement community because there weren't the right amenities for younger families and the issues of affordability for younger families. So how do we ensure that diversity of housing stock? Public space, public life. We showed a lot of examples of this, and you'll see this in the material that will be posted online from the previous presentation. How do we get some great public spaces in the communities, these gathering spaces, different kinds of parks and squares for active and passive recreation? Green streets. You happen to live in a part of the province where it's possible to grow things in a way that many other parts of the province simply do not enjoy. I would almost compare you to Vancouver and Victoria in terms of the quality of the landscape that you can develop here. And if you look at Old Town in Niagara-on-the-Lake and you look at the quality of the tree canopy in those streets, how do we make the streets have that quality that are so pleasant to walk on, where you have that combination of sun and shade and so on? And even parking areas can be treated with landscape to have that kind of quality. So then, with all those 10 things in common, we set out to create 2 concept visions. What would this look like on the ground? And we deliberately took 2 sets of premises to illustrate. So on the left, and this is one that Sunny in the back corner, and I particularly worked on, we took the notion of a more radical mix of uses, really integrating living and working and shopping at close quarters throughout the community within the neighborhood fabric. We took on the notion of how do you bridge the QEW? How do you make a strong connection, a strong gesture that would actually tie both sides of the QEW together, integrating all parts of the community? And so those things, in addition to the 10 things that we shared, became strong drivers for concept A, I'll call it, which you will see. The second concept stayed a little closer to the idea of discrete areas for employment and for the residential neighborhoods. It was not as mixed in nature, and in addition, it created an area of entertainment and tourism focus linked to the prime outlets at Niagara. So this was more of a, if you like, more of a traditional or recently traditional, not originally traditional, but more of a recently traditional way of dealing with land use. And just for the purposes of understanding what the differences might be, we sketched out those 2 alternatives. So this is concept A, which you'll see in the back of the room on the right. And in every project, there's always a kind of aha moment when you come upon something that is the key that unlocks the puzzle. And for us, it had to do with this diverging diamond interchange that the MTO is going to create, which is a first in Ontario, as I understand it. It's kind of an experiment for the MTO. There are some 30 examples that exist around North America now. And it has the virtue that it gets rid of the big clover leaves and it releases a lot of land that can be used for other purposes. And as it's currently designed, there is a physical way that pedestrians and cyclists can get across, but it involves some awkward crossings at the north and the south, and then you end up in a 3-meter wide channel between fast-moving lanes of traffic on both sides and with kind of Jersey barriers ensconcing you within the traffic lanes. And so we took a page from some solutions that have been developed elsewhere, and I'm going to flip to that and then come back to the diagram. This is from the Netherlands. I worked with the city of Amsterdam for 3.5 years, and I became very familiar with ideas that they've developed around pedestrian cycling infrastructure. And this is a kind of design that they've developed for an intensive automobile intersection where you literally lift up the pedestrians and cyclists in this ring that ties together all four quadrants of the intersection, has the opportunities to integrate with buildings, with what's happening on the surface, with trail systems on all sides. Here's another image of that. This one is actually cable stayed, and this felt to us like it could both accomplish in a much more graceful way the connection over the QEW, but it also, if you think of coming down, traveling the QEW, this would truly be a landmark for Glendale. This would be something absolutely special and different, both experiencing it by using it and passing by it. It would basically brand you in a really interesting way. This would be a very strong symbolic gesture. And so it doesn't wobble. I saw that little hand drive. No, it doesn't do that. So here you see, because of the geometry here, we've shown it in this kind of oval form. And what this would do, it would link to the college, it would link to White Oaks, and it would link to two areas on the north side as you come up Glendale here, and give the opportunity for some of these lands that are freed up by the cloverleaf to actually be designed. So the four quadrants would form a kind of urban center for the community, and the experience of getting from one side to the other would actually be a very cool experience, as well as being a landmark. So in this one, that is the basic element that we need to unlock that idea of radical mix and integration. And then what we're proposing here for the college is that there's a lot of expansion land on the site. That land could be used for accommodation of additional student housing, expansion of the athletic facilities, recreational facilities, cultural facilities that would serve the larger community and not just the college itself, really making it a true partner in the community. And of course, it would be linked via this device to other areas. White Oaks would also have the opportunity, with their expansion plans and ideas that they have about developing the rest of their site, to integrate with this. We then move into a neighborhood, and we understand that there is a plan there's a draft plan that's been submitted for this neighborhood, which is just to the north of Niagara-on-the-Green. And we deliberately took some liberties here, and we said, what if we were to think of this whole thing as a neighborhood? Think of the outlet mall eventually, and we do understand that this is a very profitable business, that it may stay in its present form even for decades. But at some point, what we're seeing all across North America is that eventually these kinds of places take advantage of their extra area, the parking supply, and start to convert and start to integrate. So we imagined a kind of main street that would go from the golf course through this Niagara-on-the-Green community, cross Glendale, come up to a point in all that we heard about lack of community facilities, a market, opportunity for a school, community center, all of those things surrounding a town park or a green in the center of this area, with a mix of different kinds of housing and employment uses in this area, and with green fingers that would link to our ecological park. And you can see that better at the back of the room when you look later. All of which creating a kind of intimate block structure, smaller streets, those green streets that I was describing, contemporary buildings. We don't imagine this to be high-rise. We're thinking of a middle scale of building, given the population that you're trying to achieve. There might be some opportunities for some special higher buildings within this fabric, but eventually this whole thing becomes a highly walkable, integrated neighborhood with a full mix of uses. So those are these two quadrants. And then if you look to the north, we have something emerging here. And then these areas, which we, to be fair, we haven't really explored to the same well, we don't have that other, we do. Okay, this is where you have the existing industrial area. And we're saying, for the moment, that has to be protected. That's where you have some critical jobs. But in the long term, what we have seen in so many other cities is more, even in places like that, an integration where you start to get a greater mix of urban uses occurring in those areas. So for those of you who are familiar with Toronto, forgive me for using Toronto example. I know it's not always politic, but on either side of downtown, we had 400 acres of industrial land called King Spadina, King Parliament. Those were the industrial powerhouses for the country at one time. Betty DeSero, who was Toronto City Councillor, knows this well. We only permitted employment in those areas. Eventually, the employment had kind of atrophied, and back in 1997, we changed the rules to allow mixed use, and we now have more people working in those areas than ever did during the height of the industrial era, but in new economy types of employment, along with people living. So we think the long-term future for these areas, and this can be calibrated, it can be monitored, would even in these areas, we might eventually see mixed use. We haven't touched anything along Queenston in terms of the residential uses there. That's kind of the edge to the countryside. And then there's an additional area in here which has the potential to develop as well as another kind of neighborhood setting. The other version B, stuck a little more closely for the reasons that I've identified to the way things work today. It wasn't quite as ambitious in terms of wanting to integrate things. So in this case, we've kept closer to the draft plan of subdivision that was submitted. We have proposed a connection, but it's not a Main Street connection. The Main Street connection, in this case, runs along the edge of the outlet mall. We've also proposed an expansion of the college, and this area in blue is that kind of entertainment tourism district, and then beside it is the industrial area and the other neighborhood. So what this is doing is you have two neighborhoods at either end of the urban area, and you have, in the middle, you have the college, and you have this entertainment kind of tourism area. And this one does not have the same big gesture in terms of making the bridge or making the connection. I want to just say one more thing about the connection, and I may get myself in trouble here. But in other situations, faced with a major transportation infrastructure initiative like the twinning of the bridge over the Welland Canal, cities have argued with transportation authorities for measures to enhance the life of the community, which end up being a fraction, a tiny fraction of the budget of the major undertaking. And we were talking today about the fact that an argument could be made by the municipality and by the region to say that as mitigation, if you like, for the impact of that twinning of the bridge, that this element, this integrating element that would tie the community together on both sides of the QEW should become part of the package. I think it's at least worth making that case. So that's where we got to. We would invite you to have a closer look at the two sketches in the back, and with sticky notes, we'd love to have you post your thoughts. There will be another information session in mid-August when we receive all the feedback that we've gotten from these 2 days and additional feedback and present the emerging preferred vision. There's also an opportunity via email, and I hope you can read that, Thomas Villela at niagararegion.ca to get your feedback. But are we going to take some questions now? If people have thoughts, reactions, questions, we'd love to have them.
If not, we welcome then instead for people, the two drawings are posted on the back, and we're happy to join you at the back of the room. Questions? Yeah, questions?
One quick
Yes, let me go back. So in this case, what we're actually taking is a street extension that would link the college to this industrial area. So an additional street connection in addition to the diverging diamond connection.
And I think that that's an important aspect because we're not going to be able to take away the volume of truck traffic that travels through here. Unless, of course, you tell the Husky to close. So with hundreds of tractor trailers a day traversing this, it's kind of hard to envision, you know, a community heart at this intersection here with that kind of truck traffic. But with something like that, if you could somehow have the truck traffic rerouted, and we talked about this when we had the open house for the interchange, that if they could somehow route the trucks so they can go more directly to the truck stops to get it away from all this. Because I just feel that what you're envisioning here in both plans, and they're great plans, but you're trying to take something and change it completely. And you can't take away the truck traffic that's here. And as I mentioned to somebody earlier when I first got here, there's only two ways in and out of Niagara-on-the-Lake. This is one of them. The other one's Creek Road, but they're both very, very congested already. And we want to build more. How are we going to handle that congestion? And that becomes the region's problem because they're going to have to deal with the infrastructure of the roads. And I don't see anything here for that part.
Reno, do you want to say something about that?
Well, let me stand back here. Part of the process is, you know, these are new ideas. They're just emerging right now. And what we'll have to look at in terms of, you know, regional infrastructure is how to make it work and if they're actually feasible. And not just in terms of transportation, but also in terms of water and sewer and all the other sort of infrastructure pieces that are needed to support this and cost them out. And so there's quite a rigorous sort of technical process that is going to follow up. What I can say is that, you know, one of the access points that we've identified through the Transportation Master Plan that was just completed last year is another access along the 405 closer to Lewiston. So that's definitely something that we're very, very interested in. It would kind of allow folks in the old town to get on the highway without having to come through Glendale. So that's a big variable for us. So that is something that we want to factor into the transportation modeling when we look at how to make these work.
Yep.
Just to add to that, with the study the region did in Transportation Master Plan, there was a look at another crossover for pedestrians as well. And then that was changed when this sort of came up. So the actual interchange, correct me if I'm wrong, Reno, but that's looking at moving forward fairly quickly in 2019 in hopes to be completed in 2021. So that project is going to be happening quickly. And the Skyway twinning is later 2023, 25.
Yeah.
So, and that's going to be obviously a longer project, but we have to move fairly quickly, I think is what we're all getting at here. And all the players have to come together, you know, us as council and the region and the ministry. So it's very important that the input's added now. Because as you mentioned too, infrastructure, we have one siphon for the sewers that goes underneath the canal and connects us to Fort Weller. So that has to be taken into consideration too, is you know, the infrastructure.
One last question?
Back to the transportation. I know this isn't the transportation master plan meeting, but is the roundabout for here still being considered? You don't know. That's not my okay.
So let's bring this part of the evening session to a close. And we really encourage you to wander back to the two drawings and share your thoughts or speak to a member of the team before you're on your way. And we won't have a wrap-up session after we close now. And I want to just remind you to keep an eye out for the next session in August. And if there's anything else you want to share with us, you can email the email on the slide. So thank you very much for making time to come. I know everybody has 1,000 other things you can be doing on a beautiful evening. We really appreciate it. Thank you.